writers, and welcome to BS with Writers. I'm Nancy Smay, your host from Evident Inc., and I just wanted to pop in. I'm not going to do a long intro today, but wanted to introduce our guest, Kate Nolan, who is a friend and a very successful wide romance author. She has a great story and some very smart tips, so you'll definitely want to pay attention to that. Industry news, personal news, kind of all the same. Running a bunch of Facebook tests for blurbs and covers for my cozy mystery series that I'm launching as Nancy Stewart. And so it's been kind of fun seeing how those pan out and starting to get things ready to go for that launch, which will be August 15th. And then in the background, my brain is mostly focused on the fact that we're going to take a vacation here before long. And so I'm kind of scattered, making piles of things on my desk and trying to make sure I don't forget anything. And we're taking a road trip and we are taking the dog. This is a first. So I don't really know what to expect. We'll see how he does in the car. He likes to ride. So hopefully Mr. Charlie Taco will enjoy his first official family vacation. Anyway, I am going to roll right into it here. I promise for a bigger update in the future, but I didn't want you to miss out on an episode just because I am scattered. So let's roll into it. Here's Kate. Well, welcome to Bullshit with Writers. I'm here with Kate Nolan. Thank you, Kate, for joining us. Me. I'm now speaking of myself in the royal we.
Yeah.
So I do this because, as I tell pretty much everyone, I think it's fun to talk to other writers and to kind of talk about all of the weird stuff that we know and that we do and see what little differences there are, because I think all of us secretly are looking for like the secret sauce. Like, what is that one thing that you're doing that I need to know about? And you've actually already given me some of those things in my career, so thank you for that. But now you're going to share them far and wide. So let's start by, can you just kind of talk a little bit about what you write, how long you've been doing it, and sort of where you're at this point in your career?
I write predominantly small town romance, usually with a southern flair, although last year I branched out into a series set in Scotland, where I studied abroad years ago. And that's been a lot of fun. I started way back in the days of Methuselah of self-publishing back in 2010. And at that point, I was actually writing paranormal romance, which I was part of that very, very early flush. And so I had some decent success because there just wasn't that much competition. That was during the halcyon days of, if you throw it up, they will come, with no advertising, because there was no advertising then.
Right.
And it ended up getting me the attention of an agent. And I'm like, you want to tell me I don't have to write a query letter? Okay. Because at that point, the whole reason I'd gotten into it was to build an audience for the series that I wanted to pitch to New York, because this is what we all started out wanting to do, right? And so I ended up pursuing that for a year or two, and that ended up being very detrimental to my creative process because I hate everything about how traditional publishing works, as it turns out. And so I actually missed the big boom in like 2012, 2014 up. So it was about 2013, my agent and I had an amicable mutual breakup, and I went back to self-publishing. But at that point, I was so burnt out on the paranormal stuff. I just had this sort of complex about it that I'm like, I need a palate cleanser.
Yeah.
And it was, I don't know, maybe Thanksgiving-ish. And so all, the Christmas movie marathons were starting. And I love White Christmas. It is my all-time favorite Christmas movie. I watch it every year.
Because everything in the world can be saved by putting on a show.
That is correct.
Yes.
And so basically, I decided it would be fun to write a story about a community theater production, like a small town theater that was like basically dying. It was trying to save itself by putting on a production of White Christmas where some of the actors pull a Phil and Judy on the couple playing Phil and Judy. And so it was a second chance romance situation. It was just supposed to be a one-off, just a completely fun for me project. And I wrote it and completely fell in love with the town. And like writing paranormal wasn't necessarily hard, but it was not this easy. This was very much me finding my voice. It
Yeah.
was like I opened my mouth and showed up on the page because clearly I'm Southern. And so I ended up going back to the beginning of kind of where that started with the town, which was 2 books before chronologically where that little novella was set. And that was where my Wishful Romance series was born. And that was kind of how I got into contemporary. And I've gotten a bunch of series since then and sort of branched out in a number of different directions. But I am one of those people who I love connecting everything. So I have Easter eggs and connections hither and yon.
Yeah.
And so that's been a lot of fun. And then actually just recently, I am branching out into mainstream romantic suspense under Harper Jackson.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
So that like literally the first, let's see, when did that? June? No, May. It just launched.
Okay. I'm like, are you looking at a book or a calendar? What are you looking at?
No, sorry. I have my board that has all of my dates and stuff on the wall over here. But so that's the prequel just dropped. So that's going to be a much slower build because they're longer books. And I'm obviously still trying to continue with keeping my existing audience happy.
Yeah. So different pen name altogether. So you're building a whole new audience, a whole new world. And so are you going to do one and then the other and then one and then the other? Or are you like rapid releasing through romantic suspense for a while? Or what?
I don't have enough content to not go back and forth.
Yeah.
So that's basically kind of where we are. I've got 2 titles for Harper that are releasing this year. The book 1 releases in September. And then of course the rest of the year is Kate. But I went back and forth for a long time because I've wanted to do this for years and it was mostly a time thing. And I finally decided that I wanted to do a separate pen name because nobody comes to me as Kate Nolan for a body count.
Yeah.
So, like, it's still going to have the found family that I love. It's still going to be predominantly Southern because that's just me.
Yeah.
And I don't really know how to write something that does not involve Southern in some form or fashion. Scotland being an exception because I did live there for a while. But I wanted to explore some darker themes. Because mostly the stuff that I write as Kate is like sometimes I deal with difficult subjects, but it's still like fluffy and heartwarming.
Yeah. Well, and so you're telling me, so I'm assuming this is not a closed secret.
No. Like it is on the cover.
It is. So you're putting both names on the cover?
Yeah.
That's smart. Okay. I'm actually launching a second pen name too. So I'm partially asking because I think everyone will be interested, but I'm super
interested. One of those things that I think it depends on where you're moving from and what you're moving to. Because like, if you were to be moving from, I don't know, really fluffy to writing really, really dark romance with, dubcon and stuff, then those would be very, very different audiences. And I don't think the folks over here would be as interested in the stuff that's over here. I mean, to each their own. There might be some, but in my case, I knew that because I've had a few series that are kind of light romantic suspense. I would not consider them true romantic suspense because the suspense plot was just not that dominant in the narrative. But I felt like there was a significant chunk of my readership as Kate who would be interested. And so it was a very open thing.
Yeah.
And I decided, if I don't have to start from ground zero, why would I?
Yeah. I'm moving into cozy with another name, but it's been like I'm publishing in my Delancey newsletter about what I'm doing as Nancy Stewart and trying to pull as much crossover as possible.
Absolutely.
I had not thought about putting USA Today bestseller Delancey Stewart writing as. Is that what you're doing?
I don't think we have room for the credentials, but it's just
I
like
thought that would be the reason for doing it. No, so you're just going with the names.
Literally, it's just name recognition, and so that like if people are searching for me as Kate Nolan, like on Amazon, my Harper books will still show up because I'm listed as both names are listed as author.
That makes sense. Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, so cool. And you are predominantly or exclusively wide?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you have always been wide, is that right? And do you have a philosophy around that, or is that just like a business decision? or both?
Probably some of both. Because I started so early, at the very, very beginning, like Amazon was it.
Yeah.
And then there came Smashwords. And then Barnes and Noble has been through 3 different iterations. I was on all of them with varying degrees of success. But as each new opportunity came up, I was all about like, well, that's a new direction. Because I was, when I started working or writing professionally, I was still working like day jobs, multiple day jobs. So in that sense, I was like trying to reach as many readers as possible because I wanted to be able to quit some of those jobs.
Sure.
And ultimately was able to. That was like my mark of success, is like, I got rid of a day job. Because I was working 3 when I started.
Okay, we're going to come back to that too.
Okay. And so I went into it from that perspective, but also I don't like the idea of having all of my eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
So it was really a diversification from the beginning. And like I've been working on expanding into other, other formats in audio. I've never done a whole lot with paperback. It's there now, but
translations too.
Yeah, I've just gotten into translations last year. That is the only thing I have in KU, and that's mostly just from an avoiding overwhelm standpoint. Because it's just much easier to throw them in one place and run a basic Facebook ad to it and let it do its thing.
Yeah.
Eventually I may end up pulling them out of KU and then like expanding them wide, but I still it's harder to me to market those just because I don't have the same access to tools. Because I do a lot of advertising and like paid newsletters. So like BookBub, Free Booksy, all those. And I don't have any idea how like French is where I started. I have no idea how they find their books.
Yeah.
So until I find out, what those are, I'm sticking with this because it's just easy.
So you can be in KU in one language without your book being in KU in English.
Yeah, because it's completely separate. They're separate titles.
Okay, cool. Well, so you then, I'm going to assume, did not, well, maybe you did when you were little, say, I'm going to be a writer, but it doesn't sound like you then pursued writing full steam ahead for the rest of your education and went straight into it. Sounds like most of us.
This is a tale of stubbornness. I wanted to be a writer from the time I was about 12. I started writing my first book when I was 12. I don't know why we did this. I had 6th grade was when I met my best friend Adrian, and we were like very, very close friends, and basically until we left for college and sort of drifted apart. But for some reason, the week that we met, we decided that we were going to write a book together. No idea why we made this decision, but it was the thing. It was how I got bit by the bug. And over the course of the next several years, like we kept reworking the same book with these, characters that were based on us. And as we aged, so did they. And eventually she decided that was not for her, but I loved it. And that was kind of how I got started. And I won some like local small awards and stuff. And my teachers were all like, oh, she's really good at this. And my parents, who were very practical bankers, were like, that's nice, dear. Now go get a real job.
Right.
And because originally I wanted to go to college to study journalism, which with the wisdom of distance, I'm glad I did not do. But I ended up studying psychology and international studies and decided that I was going to go. I got a graduate degree in psychology, and that was what I did for a very long time. But basically, I wrote all through all of it. Well, I didn't so much write in grad school because there wasn't time, and my life was being sucked up by the hell that is a thesis. But once I got out of grad school,
just writing a thesis,
so bad. And it doesn't matter what you study in graduate school, what you're writing your thesis or dissertation on, you will hate it by the end. That's just part of the process, I'm convinced. But once I finished all of that and got out, I basically decided that a PhD was not going to make me happy. So I stopped with a master's degree. And that was 2005. And that was the point at which it was like, nothing is going to make me happier than writing. That was the thing I'd been wanting to do all my life. And I was like, okay, fine. I'm going to start treating this like a job. And so I started taking it seriously, like it was a paying job, even though it was not a paying job. And that was the thing that I was doing as I was picking up all of these teaching gigs and research gigs and whatnot, which is why I had the multiple jobs. So I had like the one full-time research job and then a couple of different teaching postings at different colleges and universities. So that was, it was a lot. We were digging our way out of massive student loan debt, and we were newly married and all that. And so, yeah, I was writing, and that was it was my escape and the thing that made me happy.
Yeah.
And so it was just this huge sort of rush when self-publishing came along, and suddenly all of the barriers were essentially removed. And I've always been very hands-on. So from the beginning, I've done everything, every part of this process. If I didn't do it myself, then I bartered for it, because one of my points of pride is that I have never spent a dime out of pocket except for the first $50 for my first cover. Everything else came out of profit. And that was something that it meant a lot to me, because I was able to pay off debt, get rid of a job here, a job there. And I actually 2.5 years ago, finally was able to leave my full-time job to write full-time. And I got an immense amount of joy in being able to tell my parents how much I was making doing that, as opposed to this safe thing.
Yeah.
It was very validating.
Assuming that your partner has been supportive throughout the process.
He has. During the pandemic was when I decided, I was like, okay, I'm done. Because I had like a longer term sort of plan, because my boss was older, and I was like, okay, I finally figured out she was never going to retire as long as I was still around, because she was making sure I still had a job. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to make this easy on her. And so I gave her 8 months notice that I was leaving. And after I gave her the 8 months notice, my husband was in a really horrific job. And I was like, okay, I've run the numbers. We can afford it. You're going to quit before you have a heart attack at 50. And so I was actually supporting both of us solely on my income for a while, until we all came out of the pandemic and he got a new job. And was incredibly grateful that I was able to do that. But yeah, when I left my position at the university, my boss was like, well, that sucks for me, but congratulations. I'm glad for you. And you get to find, hire, and train your replacement. And so that is what I did.
And so has that boss retired yet?
No.
So it wasn't you.
Well, it was not me.
Well, you don't have to wonder anymore.
No. It was a standing joke at the department that I worked in, that no one ever it was like the Hotel California of academia, because like you'd get all of these emeritus professors, and they would retire and then they'd come back and work half time, because none of them grasped the concept of what retirement actually means.
Yeah. Well, there are certain people who can't retire.
Yes.
They just can't not do.
And her wife would have killed her if she was home all the time. They drive each other nuts. So she'll never retire.
I feel that way, but my husband will definitely retire. And then we're just going to have to work it out. Well, I think this is where your she shed comes into play in this conversation. Yes. I need to know about the space that you're sitting in and how it evolved, and if you built it yourself. Tell us all about the she shed, please.
So this was my gift to myself during the pandemic, because at that time, myself and my husband and our then teenager, senior in high school, were all shoehorned into our house for all day, all the time, as we all were. And all three of us are highly introverted people. And I mean, so we very much respected each other in the sense of we are staying in our respective corners. But I had at that time, the dining room in the house that we are in now, when we moved in, I turned it into my office. It was an office/library. And at that, for all the years before that, it was fine. I was conditioned to work in there. But then once I had to do my day job in there, I lost all of the conditioning that this is a writing space. And also it was directly across from the kitchen, because of course it was actually a dining room, and all of the spare drinks and crap were in my office. And so this was constant parade of people coming, and I'm like, okay, that's it.
Yeah.
I'm building a she shed. And so we did not build it from scratch. I got one of those like prefab building deals,
Yeah.
and hired a contractor who finished it out, and it is fabulous, and I
But
love
you
it.
live in the South, so is it
Yes, I
air
do.
conditioned?
Oh God, yeah.
Okay. Is there a bathroom in your she shed?
No, that would have been a whole lot more expensive. Running
Yeah.
electric from the house was one thing. Running plumbing was a whole different. And plus, this means I get up and stretch on the regular, which I need to do anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's
It
nice
only
though.
sucks on rainy days.
When your own. Oh, I could see that. Yeah. You need to just build a little tunnel.
Kind of hard to do from here. I'm in like way in the bottom corner of the yard.
You got your own space. That's amazing. And
yes. And my husband just has started a new position in his company that's fully remote. So he is now working from home. And he's also immensely grateful that I have the she shed so that we have our like, because when you're an introvert, there is an appreciation of the house is truly empty except for the pets.
Yes.
And because we are both introverted, we both need that. And so this enables us to have our own corners and spaces and do our thing. And then we come back together at meals and it's like, hey, how are you doing?
Yeah, I am like that. I have the appreciation for that. I'm not sure my husband does, but I swear somewhere during the pandemic, I like looked around and I was like, I have not been alone in like a year and a half. I want to be alone. It's just, yeah, some people I don't think need it, but
I don't understand those people.
I love being alone.
Yeah.
I also really like people, but I really like to be alone.
I like to be able to hear myself think.
Yeah. And so he's been working from home a lot. I love my husband. I plan to keep him, but he right now has this great job where he's in California 3 weeks out of a month.
Oh, wow.
We live in Colorado. So it's been really good. I know a lot of couples would not see that as a good thing, but it works well for us. And he has been home for almost the past 2 months. And I'm like so
that
used
would be
to
a
the
shift.
other thing that I'm like, why are you here? But it's fine. It's all good. All right. Well, let's get back to the writing a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about your how do you do it? What do you use? Do you write in Scrivener? Do you write in Word? Do you write in a Google Doc or on note cards that you then shuffle, or like, what do you do?
Well, I do write in Scrivener. I more or less use it as a word processing program. Like it's got a bazillion features that I know I don't take advantage of, and that's fine.
Same.
But my process, I am a rabid plotter.
A what now?
I'm a major plotter.
Oh, rabid. I'm like a rabbit plotter. Tell me.
I mean, given the number of ideas that are coming out of my brain, that could also be accurate. But from a strength standpoint, I am futuristic, input strategic, learner, and maximizer.
Okay.
And so the maximizer is the element that makes me want to be, I get obsessed with efficiency. And part of that is coming from that. Part of it is also because I was for so long juggling so many things. I had to be efficient with the minimal time that I had. And now that I do this all the time, I'm juggling still all of the other pieces of the business and honestly wondering how in the hell I pulled off what I pulled off in the years that I did it.
Yes, I get that.
I didn't sleep. I think that was the answer.
I feel like I was just more efficient when I had more to be efficient with. Like now that I'm ready.
It's like a purse. The bigger the purse, the more crap you will carry. You will fill up whatever you got.
The more time I have, the less I actually get done. When I had no time at all and everybody was like, how are you doing all that? I was like, I don't know. I just get it done. And now I'm like, how come I can't get it done now when I have time?
Yeah, that is totally a thing. But anyway, I use Scrivener, I use Evernote a lot because I started using that years ago because it was something I could use across multiple computers. Because I'm always plotting. I've got at least 100 books in various stages of plotting. I mean, some are like itty bitty kernels of just here is a trope and a funny thing that I think would go well. That's not actually a story yet. And then I've got other things that are partly plotted. And that was partly how I was able for years to go from book to book to book to book, because I always had one in the hopper ready to go.
Yeah. Well, so how do you keep that organized? That's in Evernote?
Mhm. So I've got them organized by series, and then obviously, with notebooks for each book within the series. And in some cases, and this is my one gripe with Evernote, is it won't allow multi-level nesting, because I frequently will write in. Well, I've grown to where I write in worlds. I mean, everything is all really in the same world, but like Wishful was like my series 1.0, where I basically wrote what I wanted to write when I wanted to write it. I didn't have any long-term planning involved in terms of, I intend this couple to be next, so I'm going to seed them properly in this book to make people go to the next one. I didn't do that with that series.
Yeah.
And I went back after the fact and did all sorts of things to try to better, but there's only so much you can retrofit, right?
Yeah.
And so my next series after that was called The Misfit Inn, which was about this quartet of adopted sisters. And there was this massive element of found family. I have a spinoff series with all of their foster brothers. And then I have two other spinoff series that were set in the same town. So that there's lots and lots of crossover, lots of cameos and whatnot. But it's 4 series, so I've got 4 different entry points. And then people can bebop around the whole thing. And that worked very, very well for me. And so that's something that I will continue to do moving forward, is basically creating a town, and then, okay, what are the different directions I could go?
Yeah.
With whether it's like a family series or a series around this business or whatever.
Right.
But anyway, I've got ideas for all of those things. And every time something occurs to me, I'll throw a note in there about it. And then I sit down and I'm actually, when I get to the actual plotting, sometimes I just sit down and binge write an outline. And when I say that I am a rabid plotter, my outlines tend to be about 10% of the total length of the book.
Wow.
So they're long.
So are the outlines chapter by chapter, or do you just kind
of
scene by scene? Okay, but does it start out that way, or do you kind of just like purge your brain first and then start building things in, or does it come out like that?
Mostly it comes out like that. Like, to some extent, I have like what I refer to as spaghetti files. And those are the ones that I have for years, or however long the idea is in my brain. And every time I think of some spaghetti, I throw it at the wall. And then when I get ready to actually create an outline, I'm a very linear thinker. So I'm going through I'll usually will binge plot out the first act and what that looks like. And then I have to figure out what the rest of my like tent poles are, all of my plot points. And then my brain starts fitting things onto that skeleton. The book that I'm actually in the middle of plotting right now, I've actually done something different and started like making notes on note cards and shuffling things around of like, okay, there could be some of these things, but I don't know how they go together yet. And so I've been shuffling them around to try to figure out how they fit.
What inspired you to whip out note cards this time?
Well, I got into that because I just finished book 1 for my Harper Jackson series. And with full-blown suspense, there's a lot more pieces to keep up with. And while I was writing it, in the midst of, there was a lot of personal chaos going on, and I realized after a conversation with another suspense author friend of mine that I had the wrong bad guy, the body was found in the wrong place, and I had to do some major restructuring. And so I ended up, in order to fix that, I put everything that I knew I was keeping on a note card and literally made a murder board. I have a big painting with like it's glassed in on my wall in the living room because I don't have a marker board that was big enough. So I turned it into a murder board, and I turned out I actually liked thinking that way. I liked being able to rearrange the pieces for that. Mostly my brain doesn't work that way, but for this particular thing, it did.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I have found that the mystery is a huge brain challenge after writing romance for a decade. Like, I know my brain knows how to do that, but when it came to, like, I'm okay with story arc, character development, voice, that kind of stuff, humor, no problem, small town, quirky characters. But weaving the mystery part through it was like, I didn't know who did it until at least 3/4 of the book had been written.
work better if I know who did it, because that way I know their motive and I can work back. I also have a background in forensic psychology, so I know a lot about profiling. So I mentally will approach things from that perspective, trying to sort of retrofit, like, okay, this is my villain. This is what they're motivated by. What have they done? Why did they do it? And then try to go backwards.
Hang on one second, please. Sorry. Okay. Sorry, kid going to work.
So and that I found that worked better. But then at the same time, when I wrote the prequel in that series, I knew from the beginning who the bad guy was. And I kept being paranoid that it was very obvious. And I was working very hard to insert multiple red herrings and confounding stuff to make sure that it was not as glaringly obvious to the reader as it was to me. Which it seems like mostly I pulled off in the first one anyway.
Yeah, it's just a whole different way of
it really is
thinking about a story. Well, so when you are writing an outline, is that your sole focus, or do you get like that first act outlined and then like go start writing the actual book, and then you're also working on the outline over here, or do you have to have the outline done before you actually start writing?
It depends. I prefer to have the outline done, and like the outline is not untouchable, because like things certainly, if I'm particularly when I'm starting a new series, because I'm getting to know new characters, often a new place, and that was actually part of how things went off the rails with that last book that I just finished, because I knew I plotted out the first act. I knew kind of how that went, and I knew I was going to have to write it in because I was creating new everything, and I was waiting for the characters to sort of like talk to me, so that I had a better idea of why they were doing what they were doing. And so I did not plot as far as I should have, and I definitely learned some lessons about all the reasons why I am a rabid plotter. And this is my every 3 to 5 year reminder of no, we do this for a reason.
Full of plotters.
It's like, and my editor, if she's watching this, is going to be laughing her ass off, because I used to be a pantser, a very, very bad pantser. I was not good at it. And it took me a very long time to embrace the plotting and figure out, like, it turned out that it wasn't plotting so much that I needed to learn. It was story structure.
Yeah.
And I stumbled on Larry Brooks' Story Fix blog back in the day. And it was like, finally a light bulb went off. It was like, oh, that's what I needed to know. These are the pieces, and this is what they do. This is functionally what they do. And that was a huge, huge level up moment for me, because I finally understood that thing that I was missing. Because it was like sort of internalized, but not really. I couldn't articulate this is what this does. And once I got to the point where I knew what those pieces were to do, like if I absolutely had to, as long as I had my major plot points, I could probably pants the rest and it would turn out okay.
Yeah.
I choose not to do that, but
well, and yeah, I mean, everyone has their way of working. I love that level up moment though, and kind of the aha, because I feel like for me it was the Blake Snyder Save the Cat beat sheets, and then Jamie Gold's adaptation of those that kind of became my, I need to know these things, and then I can do everything else, because I'm not a plotter, but just diving into the darkness is also not a happy feeling for me. Like the first 5 years probably in my career, all I wanted, and I looked so hard, was for someone just to give me a worksheet. Like, let me just fill in this worksheet. But what I realized is that there's a million versions of a worksheet to fill in, and I can't do it. I'm not a plotter. I'm just not.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard a lot of plotters talking about trying to pants. Like, plotters seem very comfortable with the fact that that's how they work. But pantsers are always trying to plot.
In the very beginning, I had this very romanticized view of like exploring the story of like, I think at one point I gave her the analogy of like renting a car in Ireland and just driving around and seeing where you end up. And this is how you find, the hot Irish dude in a sweater. And that was not at all how it worked. And she had a lot of very valid, but what about this? But anyway, so the basic, I think the thing that in a lot of the kind of pantser plotter arguments that come up is they assume that if you have it plotted out, that's it, that nothing changes. And usually especially for series that it's not my first book in the series, I know where I'm going. And so it usually doesn't change much.
Yeah.
But like if I get into it and I suddenly get to know the characters like, oh, he would never do that, then, you know, I will change the outline and then we just readapt everything that comes after that. And it's just a matter of basically readjusting the GPS.
Well, so Kate, when you have the outline and then you open up your Scrivener and you're writing, do you take the pieces of the outline and like stick them over in that little inspector window or something,
Mm-hmm.
like so that you know? Because
So,
otherwise, I have written outlines and then they're sitting over here and then I'm writing over here and I go just in a totally different direction because I forgot that the outline was already over there. And then I'll look at it later and be like, oh no, I can't like, and then I'm like, forget the outline. I'm just doing this.
so
Like,
basically I have the full outline in Evernote, and then I like part of my process is when I'm starting a new project, I then create the Scrivener file that has all of those scenes already mapped out. And then on an actual work day, walking is a big part of my process. I like movement gets my brain firing. So I have a walking desk, like treadmill desk. And so I basically walk and dictate. So I've got that little, you know, summary that I wrote, and then I dictate not so much prose. I haven't learned how to do that. That's on my list of goals. But I'm dictating a lot more detail about this is the like the blocking and like how any of the dialogue that comes to mind and whatnot.
So
And
kind
so
of like talking to yourself, dictating, like
yeah,
more,
like recording
more
on my
notes.
phone. So I've got like the note voice recorder on my phone. And when I'm done with that, then I export that into a program called Mac Whisper that I adore. God bless the creator, because he or she actually grasped the concept of like, you can buy the software and not continue to pay for it.
Yes, what a good idea.
What a notion. So big plug for Mac Whisper. Love that. But anyway, so then I go and I chuck that in there. And part of how I got into that particular software is because I always wanted to be able to dictate because I talk to myself a lot.
Yeah.
But again, I'm Southern, and the vast majority of dictation programs do not speak Southern.
I didn't think
It's a
about
problem.
that. Yeah.
And for a long time, I used Otter. I tried Dragon Anywhere, but I didn't love that because you have to actually speak the punctuation, and that is not natural to me. It takes me very much out of whatever I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Since I'm not dictating prose, the fact that it does not necessarily get the punctuation right really doesn't matter.
Sure.
And then I have like, you know, 1,000, 2,000 words of blah. This is what and then I turn it into prose.
Interesting. Okay. So that's a really interesting kind of middle piece that I don't think a lot of people probably do. But it makes sense to me because I think my brain works a little bit like that, like the walking, because I walk my dog almost every day. And
Sure,
but it usually, you know, I sit down and write in the morning and then I go take the dog for a walk. And during the walk, I'll think of all kinds of things that either should have gone into what I just wrote or that are supposed to go into later parts. And then as soon as I'm back, I pretty much forget about all of that. And then I think it's kind of cosmic, and that stuff all comes out somehow the next time I sit down to write, or at least I hope it does. Probably doesn't. But actually capturing it would be so awesome.
I got into dictation in the first place because I was I did a lot of the strengths for writers classes with Becca Syme, and one of her big things is, you know, not getting on your phone, not getting on social media first thing in the morning, watching your input. And historically, I'd listen to music or a podcast or an audiobook while I walked, and I was trying to be more efficient with my work. And so the idea was to sort of prime my brain with story. And so when I walk my dogs first thing when I get up in the morning. And so I started just sort of dictating notes to myself and talking myself through where I was planning to go for the day. And then I historically have always written in third person, and just this year I have swapped over to first to try that out. And I could actually dictate prose in third. I have not been able to pull off dictating prose in first. Maybe we'll get there eventually.
That's interesting.
But I also have a very much younger dog at this point. We have a puppy, and that requires much more hands. So I don't have a free hand to hold the phone while I'm talking about whatever. So I have not been dictating on my walks with the dogs. I just come in and do it after I get back on the treadmill in the nice air conditioned house.
That's really cool. I'm glad you mentioned that part. Okay, well, so let's see. I have a few. What happens after you write a book? You mentioned your editor. So do you kind of have just a team set up, and you finish a book, you send it to the same person every time? Do you have beta readers? What happens?
God, I haven't used beta readers in years. But I've had the same editor for 20 years. And so she and I've been working together. Well, I guess almost 20 years. 2005. So I met her that same year when I decided to take writing seriously as a job. So almost 20 years. And so it goes to her. And then depending on what's going on, I am really notorious for overpacking my schedule. Because Maximizer, and also I've got Achiever up there in the top 10 too. So I have been making a concerted effort for the last couple of years to try to unpack my schedule so that I actually have downtime. And life has foiled most of my efforts because, like, I'll have space and then life eats it up, and then suddenly I'm on top. I'm behind on the next book, and it's a work in progress. Yeah. But anyway, so it goes to her, then comes back, I do whatever revisions, and then it goes to my narrators and to be produced for audio. And by that point, I'm already into the next book. Then otherwise, I'm juggling all of the other admin pieces of running a publishing business.
Yeah. And does every single one of your books at this point go into audio?
Pretty much. I've got some shorties that I save those up until I can just send them a chunk of shorties and be like, here. And
are
those
are the same narrators for all the books? Do you just kind of have a couple narrators on standby, or?
I've been working with Amy McFadden since I started working in audio in 2017. I handpicked her specifically for my Wishful series, and we've gotten to be really good friends. So anything that's not dual narrated, that just definitely goes directly to her. And then for the dual narrates, she had narrated everything that I did up until Scotland, and then I had experimented with having a different couple for each book for my Kilted Heart series. And in some ways I liked that, in some ways I didn't. Because
she had the same couple for all the books?
My first series, she was just a solo narrator. I didn't do dual narration until much later, because it's expensive. And I had a very large backlist that I was working on getting in audio at that time. So she did solo narration.
Sorry, Kate, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm curious, because they go together in my head. Are the books one POV then, or were the books dual POV, but you just had a single narrator?
Dual.
Okay.
They're dual POV.
Okay.
And that is, I mean, having a single narrator for the entire book is not uncommon.
Yes, I know. But as you said, it's super expensive to bring in two, and then somebody has to produce.
And of course, like everything, costs have gone up over the course of the last 10-15 years. My brain has derailed.
Sorry, I totally interrupted you. So for the Scotland series, you wrote different couples for each book, and so that was where.
Oh yeah. So I had different couples for each book, and they did a good job. So I had no complaints by it. It was just weird because Amy and I have known each other long enough that she opens her mouth and I hear myself come out of it. Mm-hmm. So she reads it exactly like I intended it, and so I'm attached to that.
Yeah.
And so she and Ryan Wester, who I have picked out for the entirety of my Wayward Son series, which is the romantic suspense series. And I wrote it specifically with them in mind. Cool. And then my Kate stuff, we'll just kind of have to see how that shakes out. I haven't decided on some of the things for the rest of my current series at Special Ops Scots. It's another spinoff of my Kilted Heart series from last year. I'm going to have to wait until the second hero starts talking to me before I decide whether I want a different pair of narrators for that or not.
And are they doing Scottish accents for those? Oh, that sounds so hard.
The guy that narrated she and John Lane narrated the prequel for that series, which literally just dropped last week. And I believe he is actually Scottish.
Oh, it's probably not hard for him then.
I'm told he shows up to award shows in kilt, so I'm assuming he actually is Scottish.
Love it. Not my husband, my brother actually got married in a kilt, and I sort of question how appropriate that was given our heritage, but we are a little bit Scottish.
My husband's way back, his family is Scottish, and I was angling for that, and I got told a very firm no. So we had a bagpiper. I won that one for our wedding. Oh, nice. We had a bagpiper.
Yeah, my brother did not have a bagpiper, so maybe they made some similar sort of, I don't know. All right, well, so let's talk a little bit about marketing. Okay. And this is where you and I had a conversation a long time ago. Mm-hmm. I want to say it was in Pippa Grant's kitchen.
It was.
Yeah, where you kind of like smacked me upside the head, and I was like, oh, you're right. Why aren't I doing that? And what you told me was, because at that point I was wide with all my books, and you were like, so here's what you do. Make the first book in the series free for 3 months, and then go book a whole bunch of promos for those 3 months. And then you don't have to think about it for those 3 months, and then pick another book. And I've been doing that for the last 2 or 3 years, and have to say thank you. That was a really good idea. And if I actually get off my butt and do it all at one time for the 3 months coming, then I have nothing to worry about for a while. And that's always nice.
I will be literally doing that after we get off this call.
It is good advice. If you're wide and you can make a book perma-free whenever you feel like it. It's much harder. Now I'm releasing new series into KU. My old stuff is all wide, and so it gets a little more complicated. But I still do that with the backlist. So, what things are like, I always do this, just totally basic, and that's probably one of them. And then what are some things that, I mean, TikTok comes up all the time now as like the thing everyone is sort of thinking about, but not necessarily doing. So are there things like that you're sort of thinking, I'm probably going to be doing this. These are things I probably should be doing.
So I am the person who is successful and not necessarily flashy about it. Like I'm not hanging out at the top of charts. This is one of the, I'm a good example of the whole bank over rank, that you frequently hear from folks who are wide, because I started out the way that I did, working all of these other things. And I had such limited time to put into this career. I had to be very choosy about how I spent my time and what I did with it. And of course, number one priority is always write the next damn book, because backlist is where you make your money in most cases. And after that, the big thing that when I had time and bandwidth to add one more thing to the list, my big thing was newsletter, and growing my newsletter and making sure that it is engaging and maintains good open rates and so on and so forth. I have given away a stupid lot of books over time between either newsletter magnets, which have rotated over the years because big backlist, I can do that. And through, I've done a lot of like the round robin swaps, the book club swaps, although I think those are basically going to go away since they've made the changes that they've made with newsletter compliance, because it's just harder. You're not supposed to opt into, hey, let's have 12. You're opting into 12 newsletters at once, whether you like it or not.
Yeah,
I think those are basically going to go away. But some of those, and so I've done a lot of that because my focus is always on growing that, because that is the platform that I own.
Right.
So I don't have to worry about somebody is going to go change the rules on me. Like, Facebook can decide, oh, you used to have organic reach, but now you have to pay for it. And even if you pay for it, you're probably not actually going to get it. So that's always been very important to me. After that, with Kate, I didn't deliberately seek out to grow this. And I'm doing this more deliberately now with my new pen name, just because I'm like, okay, this actually worked. So I have a pretty decent following on BookBub and on Amazon. So my Amazon followers, I didn't do anything deliberately to grow either of those. I am now deliberately pushing that to grow those with my new pen name, just because for folks who may not want to be on my newsletter, they will still get those new release alerts, you know?
Yeah.
So to my mind, those are valuable for that reason.
Yeah. When you've
Because
got
they're,
those guys working for you, basically.
yes, yes. Um, After that, like, so for a long, long time, I did not do Facebook ads because it was truly just a bandwidth thing. I did not have the bandwidth to learn it. I'm capable. I just didn't have the time or brain. And ultimately ended up hiring somebody to do that for me. And that has worked out pretty well for me. I took that over myself for maybe 6 months, just because I'm like, okay, I want to try this, because I learned a lot by watching what she did, and then ultimately decided my time is better spent writing the books.
Yeah.
So I'm like, here, you can have this back, which is fabulous, having somebody that I can trust to do that.
Yeah.
TikTok, everybody's talking about TikTok. I have not done TikTok. I, in fact, I remember I was sitting during, maybe it was the 2021 RAM, the virtual one that we did. I was watching this from my living room, watching some presentation. I don't remember who the chick was that was doing it. And I opened the app on my phone to try to follow whatever it was she was telling us to do. And it immediately started blaring at me. And I'm like, nah. And then I just, no, I do not want anything that's going to shout at me.
Yes.
The thing with TikTok, I write small town romance that is not dark, it's not sketchy, it's not dubious or smutty. Like, it's steamy, but like, those readers have very, very different definitions of everything, because apparently they think it's more appropriate to make up words than find out what they're really called. I'm a little bitter. I'm high input. Specificity is important, man. But anyway, I do think eventually they will get there, but unless you are into Fourth Wing, ACOTAR, or all of the dark romance that I really kind of think is everybody in the entire series needs to have therapy, they're not looking for what I'm doing. Like, there are small chunks of it, but by and
Yeah.
large, as a whole, the things that are going viral and huge on TikTok, well, most of them are not going viral from the author themselves.
Right.
So, there's that.
Well, I
There's
think
also
that's the super frustrating thing is you don't control it. It's like you do something that creates some sort of groundswell, and it's either pure luck or strategy that nobody seems to be able to share. And then it just happens. Like,
yeah.
it's all mystery.
So, I kind of decided myself, for those reasons, at this time, I am not interested in spending my limited time over there. I don't like hanging out on social media to begin with. I'm a scientist. I like data. I mean, there is no very clear one-to-one connection, obvious data of, yes, social media sells books. Clearly it does. It impacts it in ways that we just can't measure. And that inability to measure makes me not want to touch it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is not necessarily the best way to approach things either. But I would rather spend my limited time and money on stuff that I have a clearer ROI on.
Yeah.
And so those things end up being on making sure that my covers are up to date and on trend, making sure that my blurbs are up to date and on trend, making sure that my back matter is optimized so that, they get to the end and immediately go buy the next book or go over here to this other series or whatever. These are all things that are actually within my control. And I've spent a lot of time over my career fine tuning at each of these points, to try to get all of this aggregation of small improvements, because it makes a big difference over time and over an entire backlist. Because I don't actually know how many books, over 50, maybe over 60 now, a lot. And so doing that across all of those makes a big difference to the bottom line. And so I prefer to spend my time on the things that I actually can control, which is not at all to say that, TikTok cannot be worthwhile, because I know other folks who've made it work. I also know other folks who have made TikTok ads work. I know nothing about that. I think there has been some element of like some influencers, and apparently you can get like a token thing and then use the content from the influencer in an ad, where you're pushing their stuff. I don't really understand how it works yet. Um, yeah, but
Well, I think that's an excellent reminder that, you have an ecosystem that you're creating as a writer. You
mhm,
have, X number of products that you control, and maintaining those products is something that I think A, it's boring, B, it's annoying, C, sometimes it's very tedious and time consuming, and it's not shiny and fancy, and it doesn't
mhm,
promise immediate virality and millions
mhm.
of book sales, and so I think we get distracted sometimes, I know I do, by like, well, let me go try this new thing, instead of like, hey, let me make sure all my shit's in one
That's your
bag.
activator kicking you in the ass.
Always. Yeah. My husband is like, your motto is ready, fire, aim.
Yeah,
Like,
it is.
that is true. So I always have to kind of do that little talking down to myself. Like, yeah, you could go spend 3 hours today on TikTok, or maybe update your back matter. That's a good idea.
Mhm. I think too that people, because there are all of these little nitpicky things, they get very overwhelmed by the sheer volume of them. And I think there is that a lot of times people will put like a personal pressure of like, oh, I must do it all at once. Don't do it all at once. That's too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
I keep a running list of these are all the things that need to be done on some rotating basis. And
Yeah.
then these are often the things that I do when I do have downtime and I have not gotten behind schedule. When I send my book off to my editor, then I'm catching up on all of these things. Like one of the things that I did, and this is not going to lie, one of the biggest pains in the ass, but also one of the very effective things. So because I have a big ass backlist, not everybody on my newsletter has read every book. A bunch of people may have read one book. I do have folks on there that have read everything, but there are a lot of folks that have certainly not heard of every book that I've ever made. And despite the fact that it makes my high input brain explode, it has never occurred to them to go to my website to actually see everything that I have ever published, even though I have it organized nice and neat and pretty, just waiting. Uh, and so I created a backlist automation for my newsletter. So
This is the other thing that you told
yes.
me to do that I did, but you'll kick me because I know what you're going to say. And maybe I need to make a list too. I have only like 3 series in it right now because I got tired of making the emails. So
That's valid. So when I did it in the first place, because it's a lot. This is not a thing that you want to create and just like binge write 82 emails at once or whatever, because that's hard.
yeah.
When at the time was not publishing as quickly because I still had all the day jobs and whatnot. And so what I did was I would write the email featuring a backlist title and I would just send it out to my regular list. And then it got appended to the backlist automation, which only went to people who were new subscribers after that date. So people weren't getting it twice. It got kind of screwed up because I moved my newsletter to a different provider and lost where everybody was in the sequence. So I'm like, okay, everybody's just going to get, it's fine. But at the time when I moved to ConvertKit, because I had done at that point, my entire automation or entire backlist. And then I didn't touch it for 2 years because I had a 2-year automation because it's a drip of one email every 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think mine is
Featuring the whatever backlist title saying, here's what this is. These are the tropes. This is why you're going to love this.
yes.
And so it means that I have a steady trickle of sales on all kinds of backlist titles, depending on where people are in that automation.
So smart.
And so yeah, I was like, I've got 2 years. It's fine. Well, guess what? It's past 2 years now. So yeah, now even I was like, yes, this is good practice. I finally got it updated this year. That was something I did while I was sitting in a waiting room while my mom was having a basic surgical procedure. I'm like, well, that's something I can update while I'm waiting on her from her colonoscopy. Sure. And so that was one of the big ones. That's again, small gains that add up to big numbers over the course of a lot.
Again, stuff that you control. It's your ecosystem, your subscribers, your books. Like, it's not hoping and praying and looking for a little bit of fairy dust on some new idea that someone mentioned to you offhandedly. Like, that is good strategic advice.
Hi, strategic. Also, I'm just a control freak. So there's that.
Yeah.
But It's not to say that all this other stuff is not worth it, because sometimes it is. And there's it also, I think you have to decide where you are. Are you going to be building a career around your books or around yourself? If you look at somebody like Lucy Score is kind of like the Taylor Swift of romance, right? She has this massive cult of personality, and she's adorable and wonderful, and she loves to engage with her fans, and she's good at it.
Yeah.
I will never ever be that person. I'm a high relator. I don't like that many people at once. That's just a lot. Now, I like my fans. I correspond with my fans. I actually answer my own email. It may take me forever, but I do eventually get to it. And that's one of the reasons that I'm not huge on social media, because I need to limit how much time I'm spending on that as opposed to writing new words.
For sure.
Because that's not a thing that usually charges me up. It drains me. So you have to balance that. For people who are like high woo and really like people, those are great things, because those are going to fuel the enthusiasm for whatever it is that they are creating. And I think that makes a huge difference in how you approach your marketing, about whether you are marketing yourself or your books. I mean, it's both, but it's a difference.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I hadn't thought in those terms of it before. And it's even got me to the point where I'm like, what am I marketing? Which one am I? Like, do you feel like you need to decide one or the other? Or do you think most people are kind of marketing both together?
I think there's I'm sure it's like anything, it's a spectrum. And like within my newsletter, I am marketing myself, and I write a very conversational newsletter to the point that I've got a lot of older readers who do not really understand how newsletters work. And I am conversational enough that there are some that think that I am writing to them directly. And so we have had correspondences based on my emails.
Yes.
And
emailed me again. She really likes me.
So, there are some, it's like, oh, hey, how are you doing, Judy? How's your back? How are the grandkids? So especially some of the ones that have been around since my very early days, I actually have developed a bit of a relationship with them. And, I've got like my Facebook fan group and that kind of stuff where I am semi-active. I'll pop in from time to time. They are frequently used as my story Bible. I'll circle back like, hey, does anybody remember? Did I actually have somebody have so-and-so have kids? Great. Was it a boy or girl? What did I name it? And inevitably, in 10 minutes, somebody's popping up. It was this on this page in this book. And I'm like, thank you, boo.
Thank God for those people. I know. I'm like, did so-and-so have blue eyes? Does anyone know? Do I have to go look?
Oh my God. I try so hard to make a reference at the beginning of a book. It's like, okay, it was this color eyes, because they'll change 5 times.
Yeah. I put it out on that right side thing. If I like any, but then I get lazy and I don't. And then
Yep.
Writer problems. All right, one last question for you. Yep. Kind of a two-part. Well, God, there's so many things I want to ask. You can choose what you would most like to talk about.
Okay.
I am interested in asking about, one, how do you form and maintain a community in such a solo career? Mm-hmm. 2, where's your thinking on mindset? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you read craft books? Like, how do you keep yourself in a writerly place? Or C, how do you maintain your physical fitness, given that what we do is sitting a lot? So you can talk to any or all of those things, and I'll be quiet now.
When you say community, do you mean community with other writers or like broader reader community?
Mostly with other writers.
Well, I think that particularly because I've been at this for so long, and like I've seen the rise and fall of lots of different groups and organizations and that sort of a thing, that I've sort of evolved into. I have 3 different Slacks that I am in all day, every day. There are 3 different groups of writers that I know from different places. Yeah. And depending on where I am in my day, it will depend on where I am. Because one of those groups is much more serious about, we are in here to get words. And so we have a lot of writer sprints and a lot of that kind of stuff. And we have multiple channels where we'll talk about like, okay, here's water cooler stuff. Here's our sprint channel. Here is, where we're reporting like, oh, here's new releases if anybody wants to share that. We have it kind of broken down. We have like a book club over there where we're reading craft books because we all have the stack. It's like, we'll get to that. We're finally making ourselves get to it.
Wait, so talk about the sprint group a little bit, because I've never understood that. I've seen all these online sprint groups, and I'm like, okay, but isn't the whole point to like not be online because I'm supposed to be writing?
I think it depends on your tolerance for interruption and like how, because what frequently happens with me is I will start up, because so we're basically doing Pomodoro sets. Are you familiar with
Okay,
those?
20
Right. So
minutes, right?
you're working for anywhere from 25 to 45 minutes,
Okay,
5 minute break, and then another round.
okay,
And so somebody is the timekeeper, and a lot of us have our own individual timers like on our computers because we won't notice. Because if you're doing it properly, you have minimized the
yes.
screen so that you cannot see the conversations that are going on over here because it's like, ooh, shiny, ooh, shiny.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, so someone is the timekeeper, and then you come back at the end of whatever the amount of time is and report, I got X number of words. Because a lot of people are very driven by the sense of competition.
That would work for me. Yeah.
Either the sense of competition or simply the accountability of having to come back and report, I didn't actually get any words, I was on Facebook. And so that's kind of how, what frequently happens with me is it will get me in the groove, and then I stop paying attention what's over here. I just go do the thing.
Yeah.
So I think it depends on how easily you recover from interruptions.
Well, so
Uh,
how did you find those people? For anyone who's kind of approaching a new writer career, like I know I have this vast network, but I honestly don't know how I got it. Like,
I'm
do
kind
you
of in the
know?
same boat because I know so many of these people and have known them for years. And every now and then we'll get together at retreats or conferences at the bar, trying to remember, like, where was it we actually met? I don't
So do
know.
you think it was like it
Um,
was retreats and conferences probably where we
like most of
first
these people, yes. Like a
met
few
a lot of
of
people?
one of my slacks is a group of folks that I know from because we all attended Becca's Strength Con when it was in Bozeman that year. One is a group of people that I've known in person for many years, and then the other is a bunch of folks that I know from conferences
Hmm.
that I got invited in to at some point. A whole bunch of us knew each other through Romance Divas back when that was still around. And I think that it has since been defunct. A lot of people, of course, knew each other from RWA, and then that's imploded.
Is what it is at this point.
Um, and so a lot of us have known each other through those sorts of connections, the sort of networking, which is not to say that there's not uh, other places out there, because I know there are lots of groups. You have to be choosy with your Facebook groups because there are a lot of them that are either drama mongers or a chicken littling with the sky is falling of whatever the latest thing is that
Oh
happens, and we're over
yes.
here like, popcorn.
Yeah, that happened 5 years ago also. Just calm down.
It's a cycle. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Um, they're like, no, Amazon is evil overlords. Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe yes, but just
It
play your
gets
role.
tiring.
So there are groups out there, and I'm certainly not naming names, that you want to avoid. I think that as a general rule, if everybody out there in the group seems to be either trying to sell you something, which seems to be many of them these days, or if you're seeing a lot of drama, those are not where you want to hang out. You want to hang out in the ones where people are actively offering to help. And you can post in some of those groups like, hey, I'm looking for a sprint group, or I'm looking for, somebody for accountability partners or whatever. And then there are discords, there are slacks, there are different because we are taking prime advantage of the connectivity of the internet, because despite this being a very solo career and the fact that there is no one around me locally, like I'm hanging out with my friends every day.
Yeah.
And then a lot of us, we just have a straight up group chat, old fashioned group chat on our phone.
Yeah.
And so the people are out there. It's just a matter of finding somebody who you line up with on either work habits, genre, goals. Because like I've got other writers that I hang out with. They don't write romance; they write other stuff. But when it comes down to we're still trying to get words, we all still got deadlines.
Yeah.
That part doesn't matter. So I think it depends on what you're looking for support with, and particularly in romance. Obviously, this is the beauty of our community, is that we are more supportive than any other community out there. And not that there's not infighting and backbiting, because there's always that, but the people in this community are far more willing to give of themselves. And I feel like that is because we are a community that is predominantly women and those who are underrepresented in other areas of diversity.
Yeah,
And I think
also because it's so predominantly indie at this point,
yes,
and so many people have had to figure so much shit out by themselves that they're
yes,
willing to help other people do it.
yes. And that is one of those things that I also would, particularly for new people, I would caution. If somebody is giving you advice, make them prove their bona fides about why they should be listened to in the first place. Because there are a lot of people who are out there, especially if they've got a course attached to their name. Go research them, see what they have actually published, and see whether they actually know what the hell they're talking about. Because there are a lot of folks out there who are selling courses right now claiming to tell you how to do things that are not actually successful at doing those things with their own work.
Yeah.
So do your research.
Yep. All right. Well, maybe we'll leave it there. I've kept you forever. All right. Awesome. Well, will you tell us a little bit, Kate, about what you have coming out next and where we can find it?
Yes. Let's see. What is on the board? Okay. So my latest release was One Fine Night, which is the prequel to the Special Ops Scott series, which it's a backstory prequel. So massive cliffhanger warning to everyone. Okay. I promise I fix it in the first book. That one's coming out in October. The next actual release, I've got 2 releases. I've got one that is, I'm pulling a title out of the archives. I had a prequel novella that I wrote as part of my Wishful series that I took down for a very long time, and I finally got it recorded in audio. So it's being re-released fresh on the 28th, which will be available everywhere wide. And then I've got the Matchmaker Maneuver.
Okay.
And then in July is my next new release, which is the Summer Camp Swap, and it is the last book in my Summer Fling trilogy.
The Summer Camp Swamp?
Mm-hmm. It's an identical twin story.
It almost gave me like Parent Trap feelings the second you said that.
That's exactly the point.
Oh, I love it. Okay.
Basically, the heroine gets asked for reasons to impersonate her sister at the orientation at work because her sister's not going to be able to make it on time. So the sister gets asked to and the sister who ends up doing the impersonation is like the very responsible sister. And so she has to then behave as her less responsible sister, and hilarity ensues.
I could see that. Oh, I love that. This is the
Summer Camp
Swamp, and that one comes out at when?
July 26th.
You are busy. Okay, July 26th. All right, and all of those things will be wide and everywhere because you are wide and everywhere. And audio comes out simultaneously for both of them? Look at you.
With the potential exception of Audible, which decides on its own when it's going to release anything because they don't believe in release dates.
Okay, fair. We control what we can control, and we
drink wine.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kate, for spending some time with me today. This has been awesome.
This has been fun. Next time we should do it with wine.
Yes, we'll do it with wine. I'll bring it.
Okay.
All right.
You can find story writing tips, tricks, coaching, and courses at our site, www.evidentinc.com. Get live feedback in our writing community at Facebook at facebook.com/evidentinc. And find past episodes of Story Strategy at our YouTube channel. Story powers the world, and we can't wait to help you tell yours.